I went camping with 5 friends, but we keep ending up with 6 in our count. As we sat around the crackling campfire, the warmth casting a soft glow on everyone's face, I was the first to notice the anomaly in our circle. There were 6 of us basking in the firelight, though only 5 had left home together earlier that day. Somewhere along our journey, a 6th person had silently joined us, but pinpointing when and where was puzzling. Their features seemed familiar, as if they had been part of my life story forever. It took me a considerable amount of time to discern the stranger among us. I scrutinized each face, replaying our shared histories and fitting each into the mosaic of my past like pieces of a well-worn puzzle. The first face was Mark's, his features animated in conversation with Sarah, his high school crush. I had known them since the 10th grade when Mark and I played as wide receivers on our school football team, and Sarah cheered from the sidelines. Their dynamic was always filled with Mark's relentless flirting and Sarah's playful rebukes, a routine that had cemented our bond through countless post-game hangouts. Next to Mark was Ben, my best friend since first grade, our friendship sealed by countless childhood escapades and shared secrets. His arm was casually draped over Justine, his girlfriend since middle school. Justine had moved from Chicago in 7th grade, a shy newcomer who soon found her place among us, her quiet demeanor blossoming into a warm and engaging personality. Over the years, she had grown particularly close to Sarah, their friendship a testament to time and shared experiences. As my gaze drifted, it finally settled on the unfamiliar face, the 6th person whose presence was unaccounted for. I stared harder, trying to stir the recesses of my memory, but his name eluded me, assuming I had ever known it. His features were oddly recognizable, yet I couldn't connect him to any of my memories. How could someone so familiar remain so unknown? His interactions were seamless with the group. He laughed in sync with Mark and Sarah's jokes, matching their smiles with his own. Yet, this synchronicity only deepened the mystery. How had this stranger woven himself into our group's fabric so effortlessly that none of us sensed his foreignness until now? I was about to voice my confusion when it struck me to approach the matter directly. "Hey," I called out tentatively, hoping to unravel the mystery of this enigmatic 6th member. "Porter, isn't it?" I ventured a guess, throwing out a name as an anchor to latch onto any possible shred of memory. His reaction, I hoped, would shed light on this unsettling puzzle. Ben's voice pulled me back from my distracted vigil over the mysterious 6th member of our group. "You seem lost in thought. What's on your mind?" he asked, chuckling as he recounted a story to Justine. "I was just telling her about our 5th grade teacher." "What was his name again?" he probed. "Mr. Smith," I replied automatically. "Right, Mr. Smith. Remember how you used to get under his skin like when you turned in that assignment in yellow ink?" Their laughter filled the night air and I joined in, though my laughter was more subdued. As the mirth continued, I caught the stranger's eye. He was grinning, quietly observing our interaction from a slight distance. His constant vigilance was eerie, and his aloof demeanor meant he'd easily escaped our notice before. There was something unsettling about his silent, watchful presence. It felt as though he was studying us, analyzing our every interaction. Ben finished his beer with a satisfied sigh and tossed the empty can back into the cooler. "Need to take a leak," he announced abruptly, then strode off into the enveloping darkness of the woods. In his absence, Justine turned to me, a playful smile on her lips. "You always had a knack for pushing people's buttons, didn't you?" she remarked. I managed a weak smile, my mind racing with troubling thoughts. The strange man's unnoticed integration into our circle was alarming. What were his intentions? How had he blended in so seamlessly? As these questions swirled in my head, the stranger stood up abruptly, his movements oddly jerky. "I gotta take a leak," he echoed Ben's words, his voice tinged with a strange lisp that seemed to make speaking a laborious task. He walked with an uneven gait, vanishing into the same dark woods that had just swallowed Ben. No one else seemed to notice or care, their attention fixed elsewhere. Justine continued talking, her voice a comforting sound in the uneasy silence that followed the stranger's departure. "I've always admired the bond you and Ben have," she said, her tone wistful. "Moving cities was tough. Leaving behind friends is never easy, but then I wouldn't have met Ben or any of you wonderful people." Her words brought a bittersweet realization of the complexities of life's journeys, intertwining paths in unexpected ways, yet Her sentiment was overshadowed by the growing unease about our uninvited guest, whose motives remained as obscure as the shadowy woods he had disappeared into. I turned to Justine, my voice tinged with urgency. "Justine, don't you find it odd? Haven't you noticed anything unusual?" Her puzzled expression made me point to where the mysterious man had been sitting. "Who was that guy?" I asked, my tone indicating the gravity of my suspicion. Justine hesitated, her eyes flickering to the now empty spot before returning to the flames. She frowned, a clear sign she was piecing things together, her concern visibly growing. I don't know," she admitted, her voice trailing off as if the answer was just beyond her grasp. "Who is he?" I pressed further, needing her to acknowledge the oddity of the situation. Our eyes locked, each searching the other for reassurance or an answer. Before Justine could respond, a chilling screech pierced the night from the direction of the woods, abruptly halting our exchange. The sound was sharp and unnerving, like that of a large, distressed animal, a sound both foreign and alarming. The eerie call silenced our group instantly, leaving only the crackle of the fire to fill the void. "What the hell was that?" Mark blurted out, breaking the tension. Sarah shook her head. "I've never heard anything like that. Could it be some kind of mountain lion?" Justine speculated, though her voice lacked conviction. I shook my head in response to her query. My mind was racing with worry for Ben, still unaccounted for in the woods. The stranger's movements were jerky and uncoordinated, reminiscent of a young animal uncertain of its limbs. His actions seemed rehearsed, lacking the fluidity and ease that comes with familiarity. It didn't occur to me then, but looking back, there were clear signs that he wasn't entirely human. At the time, though, all I could think was how out of place he seemed, almost as if he were merely playing the part of a person. Debating internally, I considered confronting him directly. I wanted to demand what he was doing among us, his purpose. Yet, fear held me back. The possibility that he could be a dangerous individual, perhaps even a serial killer, loomed large in my thoughts. Was he armed? Would challenging him trigger a violent reaction that might endanger us all? As the minutes ticked by with no sign of Ben, my suspicions about the stranger deepened. I watched him intently, interpreting every move he made as calculating and sinister, as if he were marking his next victim. Fear morphed into anger, and a defensive instinct kicked in. Nearby, the axe we used for chopping firewood rested against my chair, its presence suddenly significant. Convincing myself of the need to act, I gripped the axe handle, the smooth wood offering a cold comfort. Just then, Justine's hand on my arm startled me. "Porter, where's Ben?" she asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "It's okay," I reassured her, though my voice lacked conviction. "I'm sure he's fine," claiming a need for more firewood as a pretext to distance myself from the camp and the stranger. I awkwardly announced my departure. Okay, dude," Mark responded, nonplussed. Justine's voice quivered. "Porter?" I had inadvertently drawn attention, particularly from the stranger, whose intense gaze followed me as I passed him. His eyes bore into me until I reached the edge of the woods, where I saw him do something chilling. His head turned unnaturally far as he tracked my movement. His relentless stare offered no respite, no chance to act without his notice. I moved deeper into the shadows of the trees, my heart racing, unsure of my next move, but driven by the urgent need to protect my friends and uncover the truth. I hadn't seen him stand or approach. Yet suddenly the strange man was standing mere inches from my face. It was as though he had materialized out of thin air. A metallic tang, like blood mixed with copper, filled the air around him, intensifying the unease that gripped me. The axe in my hand shook. The earlier resolve to use it had vanished in an instant. Frozen in place, my skin erupted in goosebumps from the sheer intensity of his presence. He exuded an unsettling power. In a strained voice that seemed to grapple with each syllable, he commanded, "Get some firewood," his mouth stretching into a wide, unnerving smile. Just then, a distraction came. Ben stumbled out of the woods. "Justine!" he called out, and she rushed to him, relief evident in her embrace. "Did you hear that sound? We thought it might have been an elk," Ben recounted, brushing off the forest debris. Mark inquired about his prolonged absence, and Justine's concern was palpable as she asked, "Why did it take you so long?" Ben explained. I got turned around, lost sight of the campfire, thought I'd end up spending the night out here alone. As I listened to Ben, relief washed over me like a warm tide. None of us could determine the exact moment the stranger had infiltrated our group. His entry had been as silent as it was mysterious. In response, we hurriedly packed up our campsite, our movements frenzied and anxious. The 15-minute walk back to our cars was shrouded in the deep, unsettling darkness of the woods. Our flashlights sliced through the night, and although we heard that eerie screech again, supposedly from an elk, though my doubts grew, we were somewhat reassured by its distance, growing fainter as we moved. We hastened the last part of our trek, eager to leave the forest behind. Relief washed over me as I settled behind the steering wheel of my SUV, the doors firmly locked. Justine and Ben huddled in the back seat, while Mark and Sarah followed closely in Mark's well-worn Ford Laser. Our plan was simple: find a motel to spend the night and then head home at first light. For a moment, as we navigated the winding roads out of the forest, I believed we had escaped the nightmare. I allowed myself a small smile as we hit the exit road, a straight stretch of asphalt that promised freedom. With the dark woods receding behind us, I pressed the accelerator, the SUV's speedometer climbing, driven by an urgent desire to put as much distance between us and the forest as possible. Mark, too, seemed eager to leave, keeping close behind me. The trees blurred into the night as we sped along, the road lines flickering under the sweep of our headlights. We were speeding, faster than I'd ever driven before, the needle pushing toward 100 miles per hour. A decision I would soon regret profoundly. Suddenly, the strange man emerged, stepping directly into the path of my SUV. I slammed on the brakes, heart in my throat, but it was too late. The tires screamed against the asphalt, a harsh symphony of burning rubber. The man was struck, his body folding over the hood and then hurtling down the road, his form gliding unnaturally across the pavement as if on ice. Behind me, chaos ensued. Mark, attempting to avoid the collision, swerved into the opposite lane, his car fishtailing wildly. For a heart-stopping second, it looked like he might regain control, but then the vehicle veered sharply right, crashing into the trees. The horrifying crunch of metal striking wood filled the air, followed by the shattering of glass as Mark's car collided first with one tree, then another, debris scattering into the dark. The collision was devastating. The front passenger side bore the brunt, the headlights shattering upon impact as the side of the car caved in, sending a wheel careening into the woods. The mangled car finally came to rest in a crumpled heap. Justine was the first to react, bursting from the SUV and screaming for Sarah. Ben followed closely, and I trailed behind, my body moving as if in a trance, numbed by shock. The surreal scene played out as if I were watching from afar. Justine and Ben dashed towards the steaming wreckage under the dim glow of my SUV's surviving headlight. The night air was pierced by screams, sounds so harrowing they etched themselves permanently into my memory. Those screams joined another from my past, a haunting echo I'll carry forever. When I was 13, I heard my mother scream after learning of my brother's death, her agony ricocheting off the walls of our home. Now, Justine's scream mingled with these memories as she discovered the horrific scene inside the twisted remains of the Ford Laser. Mark was barely recognizable, his body grotesquely entangled with the car's shattered frame. Sarah, though alive, was blinking slowly, her breathing strained and labored. Her arm was horrifically broken, and her legs were crushed beneath the dashboard, folded unnaturally beneath her. Justine collapsed, her grief overwhelming as she sobbed uncontrollably on the roadside. Ben, overwhelmed by the sight, staggered away to vomit. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my phone to dial 911, the numbers blurring before my eyes. When I finally connected with As the strange man retreated towards the woods, I witnessed an unbelievable transformation. This was no trick of light or moment of hysteria. What I saw was terrifyingly real. Before my eyes, he morphed, his body twisting into a grotesque new form, what I now believe to be the mythical Goat Man. Horns protruded awkwardly from his head, a gruesome snout grinning with rows of razor-sharp teeth, all while maintaining an eerily upright gait. Then, just as quickly as he had revealed his true nature, he disappeared into the darkness of the woods. 8 months have passed since that harrowing night. The trauma has irreparably altered the fabric of our friendships. We've met only a few times since, Each encounter serves as a painful reminder of the terror we experienced. Mark's life was cruelly snatched away that night. Sarah, though she survived, lives with profound changes as a triple amputee. Justine and Ben's relationship couldn't withstand the strain and eventually crumbled. As for me, I've been a shadow of my former self, unkempt, with a ragged beard and uncut hair, driven by a relentless quest for answers about the nightmare we encountered. I've spent every sleepless night since poring over folklore and cryptid research trying to understand the creature I saw. The Goat Man. This name echoes in my mind, a sinister reminder of that fateful encounter. I can no longer stay away. I'm drawn back to those haunted woods. Driven by a mix of fear, obsession, and a desperate need for closure, I am determined to face this entity again. So, help me, God. I'm returning to those woods. I'm going after the Goat Man. And I won't stop until one of us is no longer a threat. The stakes are life or death, and I am prepared for whatever comes.